Greek Esther chapter 7. So the king and Haman went in to drink with the queen. And the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king said, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your petition, and what is your request? It shall be granted to you, even to half of my kingdom." She answered and said, "If I have found favor with the king, let my life be granted me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, plundered, and made slaves, we and our children, male and female slaves. I took no heed, but now our adversary brings shame on the king's court." Then the king said, "Who is the person who would dare to do this thing?" Esther said, "Our enemy is this evil man Haman." At this, Haman was terrified in the presence of the king and queen. The king rose from the banquet and went into the garden, and Haman began to beg for his life from the queen, for he saw that he was in serious trouble. When the king returned from the garden, Haman had thrown himself on the couch, pleading with the queen. The king said, "Will you dare even assault my wife in my own house?" Haman, when he heard, turned away his face. Then Bugathan, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, "Look, Haman has even prepared a pole for Mordecai, who gave information of concern to the king. It is standing at Haman's house, a pole 50 cubits high." So the king said, "Let Haman be executed on that." So Haman was hung on the pole that had been prepared for Mordecai. With that, the anger of the king abated. Greek Esther chapter 8. On that very day, King Artaxerxes granted to Esther all the property of the adversary Haman. Mordecai was summoned by the king, for Esther had told the king that he was related to her. The king took his ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over everything that had been Haman's. Then she spoke once again to the king, and, falling at his feet, she asked him to avert all the evil that Haman had planned against the Jews. The king extended his golden scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before the king. Esther said, "If it pleases you, and if I have found favor, let an order be sent rescinding the letters that Haman wrote and sent to destroy the Jews in your kingdom. How can I look on the ruin of my people? How can I be safe if my ancestral nation is destroyed?" The king said to Esther, "Now that I have granted all of Haman's property to you and have hung him on a pole because he laid hands on the Jews, what else do you request? Write in my name what you think best and seal it with my ring. For whatever is written at the king's command and sealed with my ring cannot be contravened." The secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the first month, that is Nisan, in the same year, and all that she commanded with respect to the Jews was given in writing to the administrators and governors of the satrapies from India to Ethiopia, 127 satrapies, to each province in its own language. The edict was written with the king's authority and sealed with his ring, and they sent out the letters by couriers. He ordered the Jews in every city to observe their laws, to defend themselves, and to act as they wished against their opponents and enemies on a single day, the 13th of the 12th month, which is Adar, throughout all the kingdom of Artaxerxes. The following is a copy of this letter. The great King Artaxerxes to the governors of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, and to those who are loyal to our government, greetings. Many people, the more they are honored with the most generous kindness of their benefactors, the more proud do they become, and not only seek to injure our subjects, but in their inability to stand prosperity, they even undertake to scheme against their own benefactors. They not only take away thankfulness from others, but, carried away by the boasts of those who know nothing of goodness, they even assume that they will escape the evil-hating justice of God, who always sees everything. And often many of those who are set in places of authority have been made in part responsible for the shedding of innocent blood, and have been involved in irremediable calamities, by the persuasion of friends who have been entrusted with the administration of public affairs, when these persons, by the false trickery of their evil natures, beguile the sincere goodwill of their sovereigns. What has been wickedly accomplished through the pestilent behavior of those who exercise authority unworthily can be seen not so much from the more ancient records that we hand on as from investigation of matters close at hand. In the future, we will take care to render our kingdom quiet and peaceable for all, by changing our methods and always judging what comes before our eyes with more equitable consideration. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, a Macedonian, really an alien to the Persian blood and quite devoid of our kindliness, having become our guest, enjoyed so fully the goodwill that we have for every nation that he was called our father and was continually bowed down to by all as the person second to the royal throne. But, unable to restrain his arrogance, he undertook to deprive us of our kingdom and our life, and with intricate craft and deceit asked for the destruction of Mordecai, our Savior and perpetual benefactor, and of Esther, the blameless partner of our kingdom, together with their whole nation. He thought that by these methods he would catch us undefended and would transfer the kingdom of the Persians to the Macedonians. But we find that the Jews, who were consigned to annihilation by this thrice accursed man, are not evildoers, but are governed by most righteous laws, and are children of the living God, most high, most mighty, who has directed the kingdom both for us and for our ancestors in the most excellent order. You will, therefore, do well not to put in execution the letters sent by Haman, son of Hammedatha, since he, the one who did these things, has been executed at the gates of Susa with all his household. For God, who rules over all things, has speedily inflicted on him the punishment that he deserved. Therefore, post a copy of this letter publicly in every place, and permit the Jews to live according to their own customs, and lend them support, so that on the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, on that very day, they may defend themselves against those who attack them at the time of affliction. For God, who rules over all things, has made this day to be a joy for his chosen people, instead of a day of destruction for them. Therefore you shall observe this with all good cheer as a notable day among your commemorative festivals, so that both now and hereafter it may represent deliverance for us and for those loyal to the Persians, but a reminder of destruction for those who plot against us. Every city and country, without exception, that does not act accordingly, shall be destroyed in wrath with spear and fire. It shall be made not only impassable for humans, but also most hateful to wild animals and birds for all time. Let copies of the decree be posted conspicuously in all the kingdom, and let all the Jews be ready on that day to fight against their enemies. So the messengers on horseback set out with all speed to perform what the king had commanded. And the decree was posted also in Susa. Mordecai went out dressed in the royal robe and wearing a gold crown and a turban of purple linen. The people in Susa rejoiced on seeing him. And the Jews had light and gladness in every city and province, wherever the decree was published. Wherever the proclamation was made, the Jews had joy and gladness, a banquet and a holiday. And many of the nations were circumcised and became Jews out of fear of the Jews. Greek Esther, chapter 9. Now on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is Adar, the letter written by the king arrived. On that same day, the enemies of the Jews perished. No one resisted, because they feared them. The governors of the satrapies, the princes, and the royal secretaries were paying honor to the Jews, because fear of Mordecai weighed upon them. The king's decree required that Mordecai's name be held in honor throughout the kingdom. Now in the city of Susa, the Jews killed 500 men, including Pharsanastane, Delphon, Phasca, Pharadatha, Bariah, Sarbaka, Marmasima, Aruphaeus, Arsaeus, Zabotheus, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Bugaean, the enemy of the Jews, and they indulged themselves in plunder. That same day, the number of those killed in Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Esther, "In the city of Susa, the Jews have destroyed 500 people. What do you suppose they have done in the surrounding countryside? Whatever more you ask will be done for you." And Esther said to the king, "Let the Jews be allowed to do the same tomorrow. Also, hang up the bodies of Haman's 10 sons." So he permitted this to be done and handed over to the Jews of the city the bodies of Haman's sons to hang up. The Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 14th and killed 300 men, but took no plunder. Now the other Jews in the kingdom gathered to defend themselves and got relief from their enemies. They destroyed 15,000 of them on the 13th of Adar, but did not engage in plunder. On the 14th day of the same month they rested and kept it as a day of rest with joy and gladness. The Jews who were in the city of Susa came together also on the 14th, but did not rest. They celebrated the 15th with joy and gladness. On this account, then, the Jews who are scattered around the countryside keep the 14th of Adar as a joyful holiday and send presents of food to one another, while those who live in the large cities keep the 15th day of Adar as their joyful holiday, also sending presents to one another. Mordecai recorded these things in a book and sent it to the Jews in the kingdom of Artaxerxes, both near and far, to institute these days as holidays, and to keep the 14th and 15th days of Adar, for on these days the Jews got relief from their enemies. The whole month, namely Adar, in which their condition had been changed from sorrow into gladness, and from a time of distress to a holiday, was to be celebrated as a time for feasting and gladness, and for sending presents of food to their friends and to the poor. So the Jews accepted what Mordecai had written to them, how Haman son of Hammedatha the Macedonian fought against them, how he made a decree and cast lots to destroy them, and how he went in to the king, telling him to hang Mordecai. But the wicked plot he had devised against the Jews came back upon himself, and he and his sons were hanged. Therefore these days were called Purim, because of the lots, for in their language this is the word that means lots. And so, because of what was written in this letter, and because of what they had experienced in this affair and what had befallen them, Mordecai established this festival, and the Jews took upon themselves, upon their descendants, and upon all who would join them to observe it without fail. These days of Purim should be a memorial and kept from generation to generation in every city, family, and country. These days of Purim shall be observed for all time, and the commemoration of them shall never cease among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Amminadab, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote down what they had done and gave full authority to the letter about Purim. And Mordecai and Queen Esther established this decision on their own responsibility, pledging their own well-being to the plan. Esther established it by a decree forever, and it was written for a memorial. Greek Esther chapter 10. The king levied a tax upon his kingdom, both by land and sea. And as for his power and bravery and the wealth and glory of his kingdom, they were recorded in the annals of the kings of the Persians and the Medes. Mordecai succeeded King Artaxerxes and was great in the kingdom, as well as honored by the Jews. His way of life was such as to make him beloved to his whole nation. And Mordecai said, "These things have come from God, for I remember the dream that I had concerning these matters, and none of them has failed to be fulfilled. There was the little spring that became a river, and there was light and sun and abundant water. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The 2 dragons are Haman and myself. The nations are those that gathered to destroy the name of the Jews. And my nation, this is Israel, who cried out to God and was saved. The Lord has saved his people. The Lord has rescued us from all these evils. God has done great signs and wonders, wonders that have never happened among the nations. For this purpose he made 2 lots, one for the people of God and one for all the nations. And these two lots came to the hour and moment, and to the day of judgment before God and among all the nations. And God remembered his people and vindicated his inheritance. So they will observe these days in the month of Adar, on the 14th and 15th of that month, with an assembly and joy and gladness before God, from generation to generation, forever among his people Israel. In the 4th year of the reign of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, Dositheus, who said that he was a priest and a Levite, and his son Ptolemy brought to Egypt the preceding letter about Purim, which they said was authentic and had been translated by Lysimachus, son of Ptolemy, one of the residents of Jerusalem. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 1. Love righteousness, you rulers of the earth. Think of the Lord in goodness, and seek him with sincerity of heart, because he is found by those who do not put him to the test, and manifests himself to those who do not distrust him. For perverse thoughts separate people from God, and when his power is tested, it exposes the foolish, because wisdom will not enter a deceitful soul, or dwell in a body enslaved to sin. For a holy and disciplined spirit will flee from deceit and will leave foolish thoughts behind, and will be ashamed at the approach of unrighteousness. For wisdom is a kindly spirit, but it will not free blasphemers from the guilt of their words, because God is witness of their inmost feelings, and a true observer of their hearts, and a hearer of their tongues. Because the Spirit of the Lord has filled the world, and that which holds all things together knows what is said. Therefore those who utter unrighteous things will not escape notice, and justice, when it punishes, will not pass them by. For inquiry will be made into the counsels of the ungodly, and a report of their words will come to the Lord, to convict them of their lawless deeds, because a jealous ear hears all things, and the sound of grumbling does not go unheard. Beware, then, of useless grumbling, and keep your tongue from slander, because no secret word is without result, and a lying mouth destroys the soul. Do not court death by the error of your life, or bring on destruction by the works of your hands, because God did not make death, and he does not delight in the destruction of the living. For he created all things so that they might exist. The generative forces of the world are wholesome, and there is no destructive poison in them, and the dominion of Hades is not on earth. For righteousness is immortal, but the ungodly by their words and deeds summoned death. Considering him a friend, they pined away, and made a covenant with him, because they are fit to belong to his company. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2. For they reasoned unsoundly, saying to themselves, Short and sorrowful is our life, and there is no remedy when a life comes to its end, and no one has been known to return from Hades. For we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been, for the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. When it is extinguished, the body will turn to ashes, and the spirit will dissolve like empty air. Our name will be forgotten in time, and no one will remember our works. Our life will pass away like the traces of a cloud, and be scattered like mist that is chased by the rays of the sun and overcome by its heat. For our allotted time is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return from our death, because it is sealed up, and no one turns back. Come, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that exist, and make use of the creation to full, as in youth. Let us take our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no flower of spring pass us by. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Let no meadow be free from our revelry. Everywhere let us leave signs of enjoyment, because this is our portion, and this is our lot. Let us oppress the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow, or regard the gray hairs of the aged. But let our might be our law of right, for what is weak proves itself to be useless. Let us lie in wait for the righteous man, because he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions. He reproaches us for sins against the law, and accuses us of sins against our training. He professes to have knowledge of God and calls himself a child of the Lord. He became to us a reproof of our thoughts. The very sight of him is a burden to us, because his manner of life is unlike that of others, and his ways are strange. We are considered by him as something base, and he avoids our ways as unclean. He calls the last end of the righteous happy, and boasts that God is his Father. Let us see if his words are true, and let us test what will happen at the end of his life. For if the righteous man is God's child, he will help him and will deliver him from the hand of his adversaries. Let us test him with insult and torture, so that we may find out how reasonable he is, and make trial of his forbearance. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for, according to what he says, he will be protected. Thus they reasoned, but they were led astray, for their wickedness blinded them, and they did not know the secret purposes of God, nor hoped for the wages of holiness, nor discerned the prize for blameless souls. For God created us for incorruption, and made us in the image of his own eternity. But through an adversary's envy, death entered the world, and those who belong to his company experience it.